Well, joining us right now to chat a bit more about this Fees Must Fall protest is Mocke Jansen Van Veuren, lecturer and researcher at the University of Johannesburg. Good morning and thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, thanks for having me.
Now, we've heard that there have been statements issued by UJ academics calling for an end to, private security and this high security, and just appealing for more dialogue as opposed to, physical approaches. What is your comment on that?
Well, I think, I have to say that academics are quite late to the party. It's been fascinating to see the leadership that has actually come from students in addressing, quite overdue questions about how universities function, about, the cost of education and so on. Following really the lead of students, academics have now started mobilizing and have now started actually organizing and finding a voice. Academics don't agree. I guess it's also in the nature of being, intellectuals, that there's arguments and that there's debate and discussion. But I think what we've noticed is that from University of Cape Town, there's been a statement from the humanities faculty. From WITS, I think the humanities faculty as well, there's been a very clear statement calling for a pathway to free education and also challenging the securitization. And now from UJ, from a collection of staff at the Faculty of Art, Design and Architecture. Again, I must qualify this by saying that not everybody agrees on everything, but we have managed to get at least 30 signatories on a statement that is calling for a de-escalation of the security situation. It's calling for conversational spaces and spaces for debate to be set up so that we can engage very productively on campus. And it also draws attention to constitutional rights that students have to protest. And I think there's really a very big problem that we're seeing where that actual constitutional right to gather and to protest is being challenged by the actual regulations of universities, and especially by the way that private security has been deployed.
Are you saying that they're being heavy-handed in terms of their security? I mean, well, what are you saying? I mean, you're saying, is it right for the students to be protesting on campus, and do you think that the situation has been dealt with properly from an administrative point of view?
Heavy-handed, I think, is an understatement. We had a press conference of UJ academics from a variety of faculties last week. Those academics were speaking from first-hand accounts of how peaceful gatherings of students were attacked by private security. Those same academics were speaking of how they were attacked, and there were actually some of the academics there that had injuries from being manhandled by these private security guards. I think it's a matter of, who do you deploy, what training have they had? Are these people that have training in defusing a situation, or are these people who have training in basically dealing physically with people who are rowdy? And I think that's something that we want to counter. There's a narrative emerging, or that has emerged really since almost exactly this time last year, a narrative that students are out of line, that they're rowdy, that they don't want to learn. There's even very damaging narratives that are saying that students are trying to avoid studying, which is entirely the opposite. We've sat with student groups that, they sit and meet into the night, all night, and they're not drinking, they're not partying, they are discussing the future of education. This is what we want to see, and to see the reaction of deploying these, what we call bouncers on campus. That is escalating the situation into a situation that has a climate of violence. And if you have that climate of violence, violent things will happen on both sides. It's unavoidable. I think what we're very much calling for is measures, and we're calling on government as well, by the way. We're calling for measures to address dialogue rather than bringing in people who deal with violence primarily. We're asking for the language to change, because I think I have made the link. I think Mr. Joseph Matundra from AMCU also made the link to the escalation of language that led to the tragedy of Marikana. And that was a language of dealing with what was a labor dispute and starting to characterize it as a criminal matter, primarily. You know, there were instances of criminal activities there, but to characterize the whole thing as a criminal matter. And I'm afraid that if that happens to what's happening in the student movement at the moment, there will be a tragedy.
But you can understand it from the university's perspective. Just on the front page of this morning's Mercury, the cost of the damage that's been done to these universities, physical damage. I mean, 60 million rand at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. We heard from the Minister of Higher Education, 600 million rands worth of damage. You can understand their caution with regards to deploying police in this kind of situation. I mean, it's not the fault of the university, would you say? It's what they're employing these private security companies. Surely, they should be held accountable as well.
Sorry, can you rephrase that question? Who should be held accountable?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Who should be held accountable? You can understand from a university's perspective that 600 million rands worth of damage has been done by these students, and they need to be cautious when it comes to these protests gathering in certain parts, that they don't want this to continue. And if it means they must be aggressive, I know heavy-handed was being used, then that's what they must do. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. They don't want any more damage.
No, absolutely. Look, we also don't want any more damage. I think we have said to students, and I think there's many students who agree, that when a transformation of our university system happens, and that's really what's being asked for, is not simply free education, not simply decolonization. I think it's quite a systemic transformation of our universities that's at stake here. When that happens, we will need those libraries. We would need the facilities. We can't do without them. So I think, I would also, and from us as academics, certainly we've even heard the same from unions, cautioning the students and saying, there's an investment here that is for you, that is for your education. Let's channel our energy where it's needed. That being said, I also want to say not that I'm defending, I think, the burning of buildings. I think we take quite a stand against that. But I think, again, there's a certain climate of violence that has been created. And I know, the situation that many students find themselves in is that they're in an institution that is set up with the intention to advance the student, with the intention sometimes of taking the child of a domestic worker or a minor and potentially, ending with a doctor or a lawyer or something like that can raise the entire family, and that really, that's transformation happening there. Now, there's an institution that is tasked with that. That institution then turns around, criminalizes students even when they are being peaceful. And I think we have to say that again, is that even peaceful protests have been criminalized. And the climate that is created then is one in which, rationality starts receding. And I think that is what we have to be careful of. If we all work together to keep things rational, dialogic, open, and transparent, then we will certainly have less of that.
Just on the question, you made a point that you want to involve government as academics, to try and resolve this and get more dialogue going. What role should the parents of these students play, and even parents of future students that will be joining the universities?
I think that is, in some ways, the most important question for me at the moment, because we've seen, all of the different actors on the stage. We've seen the students who initiated a call for change. We've seen a reaction from universities that sometimes has been heavy-handed. We've seen academics a little late, perhaps, but coming on board and having a say. We've seen even unions coming to address the students. We've seen the police. We've seen the private security. So these are all of the actors. And I think there is a gap. We are not seeing parents really coming in numbers to join the conversation. And I would make an appeal, actually, to parents to come into these spaces, to come to the universities in numbers and say what they think about this. Because at the end of the day, one of the most, I think, key issues is the burden of education. Where is it sitting at the moment? The burden of education is sitting at the moment in families that are poor. That is, you know, that is an almost, it's not almost ridiculous, it's totally ridiculous that poor families are carrying this heavy burden of education in order to benefit our economy and our industries. So the parents are really the ones who are struggling here, and I think the parents are reluctant also to step in because of the investment that they've made, sometimes a painful investment. You know,
a lot of sacrifices coming in there.
Some people talk about black tax. You know, these things are real, and parents often, you know, various people in the family have contributed to a person being able to study. Now, parents don't want to see that threatened, and I think they're reluctant to step onto the stage because they just really want their children to finish their education.
Well, thank you so much. I'm just going to have to stop you right there. We'll run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Mr. Mocke Jansen Van Veuren, who is a researcher and a lecturer at the University of Johannesburg, just giving us some insight onto the academics' perspective on this fees must fall situation.